The fragrance hit Nicholas with an unexpected force, throwing him off balance. Lavender. It was cloyingly sweet, completely out of place in their home, and a scent he'd loathed for years. Amanda knew that, she knew it all too well. Yet, there it was, lingering on her coat as she entered, her face glowing with an oddly vibrant energy. "You're late," Nicholas remarked, his voice cold as his eyes flicked toward the clock. "Work ran over," Amanda responded with a casual shrug, though her smile barely touched her eyes. She hung her coat on the rack and headed toward the kitchen, her heels echoing on the wooden floor. The rhythmic tapping grated on Nicholas's nerves, a harsh reminder of the growing chasm between them. But it wasn't just the lavender. It was the way her phone seemed glued to her palm, always flipped screen side down on the counter. It was her laughter, genuine and full, but only ever directed at her messages, never at him. It was how she would disappear into their bedroom for long stretches, emerging later with a flawless appearance, as though she were dressing for someone other than him. "Big presentation tonight?" Nicholas asked, his eyes following her as she poured a generous glass of wine. Amanda paused for a split second, her fingers tightening around the stem of the glass. "Yeah," she answered sharply, her tone edged with irritation. "Clients expect professionalism." Nicholas held back the retort that threatened to spill out. They worked in software. What kind of client demanded red lipstick and stiletto heels during a late-night meeting? Swallowing his thoughts, he simply nodded, unwilling to press her further. Not yet. The following morning, the scent of lavender still clung faintly to the air, an unwelcome reminder that lingered in Nicholas's mind. Seated at the breakfast table, he watched Amanda glide through the kitchen, her phone practically fused to her hand. She hardly spared a glance for him or the kids, Elton and Ruby, as they clamored for her attention. "Mom, are you coming to my recital next week?" Elton asked, his voice brimming with hope. Amanda hesitated, her smile faltering before she forced it back into place. "We'll see, sweetheart. Mommy's really busy with work." Nicholas caught the shadow of disappointment that clouded Elton's face. "I'll be there, buddy," he interjected, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. "Thanks, Dad," Elton replied, his face lighting up. Amanda's expression darkened, her sharp glare cutting across the table. It was the kind of look that said she saw Nicholas's simple promise as a deliberate betrayal. He met her eyes without flinching, refusing to back down. When Amanda left for work, Nicholas's attention drifted to the coat rack. Her jacket from the previous evening still hung there, faintly perfumed with lavender. Acting on instinct, he slipped his hand into the pocket and pulled out a folded receipt. It was from a trendy cafe, not her usual haunt and definitely not somewhere they frequented together. The timestamp read 9:15 p.m. Right in the middle of the meeting, she claimed had run late. A knot of unease tightened in Nicholas's chest, his mind spiraling with questions. Who was she meeting? Why had she lied? The days that followed offered no respite. If anything, the signs of Amanda's deception grew impossible to ignore. Her phone never left her side. Her laughter remained confined to her screen, and her explanations became increasingly hollow. "Big client dinner," she announced one evening, slipping into a sleek black dress that hugged her figure in all the right places. "Since when do software clients care about couture?" Nicholas asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Amanda froze in the doorway, her eyes narrowing into a glare. "You wouldn't understand, Nicholas," she snapped. "You've never understood the demands of my career." Without giving him a chance to respond, she turned and walked out, leaving behind the faint trace of her perfume, and a deepening ache in Nicholas's chest. He couldn't ignore it any longer. If Amanda wouldn't give him the truth, he'd find it himself. Starting small, he sifted through her credit card statements and old phone records. That's when the pieces fell into place. A series of charges to a nondescript hotel just outside of town, always on the nights she claimed to be working late. Nicholas stared at the screen, his worst fears solidifying into undeniable proof. Betrayal. On Saturday, Amanda announced, as casually as ever, that she was meeting her sister for brunch. Nicholas suppressed the bitter laugh that bubbled in his throat. He distinctly remembered her saying just a few days ago that her sister was out of town. "Which place are you meeting her at?" Nicholas asked, keeping his tone neutral. "The Green Fig," Amanda replied smoothly, not missing a beat. Nicholas forced a smile. "Nice. Say hi to her for me." The moment she left, Nicholas grabbed his keys and followed. His heart sank as he tailed her car to a plain, secluded motel on the edge of town. The kind of place where people go when they don't want to be found. He watched from the safety of his car as Amanda got out, her eyes darting nervously before she disappeared inside. For 20 agonizing minutes, Nicholas sat there, torn between barging in and walking away for the sake of his own sanity. Eventually, he made his choice. Inside the dimly lit lobby, his gaze immediately landed on a lavender scarf draped over the back of a chair. The sight of it stung. A gift he'd given Amanda years ago during a trip she'd begged him to take. Back then, he'd believed their love was invincible. Now, the scarf felt like a cruel relic of everything they'd lost. The receptionist barely glanced up as Nicholas approached the desk. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his tone flat and indifferent. "I'm looking for Amanda Alsop," Nicholas said, his voice steady but firm. "Which room is she in?" The receptionist frowned, shifting uncomfortably. "Sorry, sir. I can't share that information." Nicholas clenched his jaw. "I'm her husband," he pressed, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "She's meeting someone here, and I need to know where." The receptionist hesitated, clearly unsure, before shaking his head. "I'm sorry, I can't help you." Drained but resolute, Nicholas returned to his car, parking strategically where he could monitor the entrance without drawing attention to himself. He waited, the minutes crawling by, tension coiling tighter with each passing second. After about 20 minutes, Amanda emerged. Her face was flushed, her hair slightly disheveled, and she wasn't alone. Behind her walked a tall man with dark hair, moving with an air of self-assurance that made Nicholas's stomach churn with rage. The two didn't touch, but the charged energy between them was undeniable. Nicholas's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white, his entire body vibrating with the urge to confront them right then and there. But he forced himself to stay composed. A reckless move wouldn't serve him. Instead, he quietly pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. The image wasn't crystal clear, slightly grainy and unfocused, but it was enough. Enough to confirm what he already knew. Enough to ignite the slow burn of fury within him. That evening, Nicholas held his tongue. When Amanda returned home, she behaved as if nothing had happened, greeting the kids with over-the-top enthusiasm and casually recounting her brunch with her sister. Nicholas observed her closely, his silence sharp enough to unsettle her. "You're awfully quiet tonight," Amanda remarked, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Just a long day," Nicholas replied evenly, keeping his tone measured. She paused, narrowing her eyes as though she was trying to read him, but he gave her nothing. His anger remained buried, hidden beneath a calm facade. Later, when Amanda went to bed, Nicholas stayed up, digging deeper. He scoured her social media accounts, matched her claims against her timelines, and uncovered more and more inconsistencies. This wasn't just a search for answers, it was preparation. He was building his case piece by damning piece. The following week, Nicholas reached out to his brother Ben. Ben wasn't the type to mince words. He was tough, blunt, and thrived in the kind of mess most people shied away from. They met in Ben's cluttered garage, the smell of grease and motor oil hanging heavy in the air. "I need your help," Nicholas said, his voice quiet but firm. Ben raised an eyebrow, wiping his hands on a rag. "What kind of help are we talking about?" Without speaking, Nicholas pulled out his phone and showed Ben the photo. Ben let out a slow, low whistle, his expression darkening as he took it in. "So, that's her?" Ben asked, his voice weighted with disappointment. Nicholas nodded grimly. Ben leaned back in his chair, jaw tightening as he processed the situation. "So, what's the plan? You just gonna sit on this? Or are you ready to make her pay?" "I'm not rushing into anything," Nicholas replied, though the bitterness in his voice was hard to miss. "I need the full picture. Who this guy is, how long it's been going on. I want to hit her where it really hurts." A wry smile tugged at the corner of Ben's mouth. "Well, look at you," he said, his tone tinged with pride. "Finally growing a spine, little brother." With Ben's help, Nicholas moved to the next phase. They discreetly installed a small GPS tracker on Amanda's car, giving Nicholas an unfiltered view of her movements. The pattern was unmistakable. Frequent trips to the same motel, always at the same times, always tied to the same excuses. Each new discovery deepened Nicholas's anger, but he kept it all inside. Confrontation could wait. He wanted her lies to pile so high that they'd collapse under their own weight, leaving her no room to escape. One evening, as Nicholas was poring over Amanda's phone records, a new thought struck him like a thunderclap. The man, Austin Davidson. Did he have someone waiting for him at home? Someone who deserved the truth just as much as Nicholas did? Using Austin's number from Amanda's call logs, Nicholas found his name and began digging. A quick search on social media gave him everything he needed to know. Austin was married, with 2 kids of his own. Nicholas stared at the screen, his anger laced with a strange sense of solidarity. If Austin's wife didn't know, she deserved to. The truth had wrecked Nicholas's world. It was only right she had the chance to confront hers. The next day, Nicholas found himself standing at the door of a modest suburban house. When the door opened, a woman in her early 30s appeared, balancing a toddler on her hip. Her wary expression suggested she wasn't expecting visitors. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. "My name's Nicholas Alsop," he began, his voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "I believe my wife is having an affair with your husband." The woman's eyes widened as the color drained from her face. "What?" she whispered, clutching the toddler a little tighter. "I'm so sorry," Nicholas said softly, holding up his phone. "I have proof. Could I come in and show you?" After a brief hesitation, she nodded and stepped aside. "I'm Alice Davidson," she said faintly, leading him into the living room. Her toddler clung to her as she lowered herself onto the couch, her face a mix of shock and dread. "Show me," she said, her voice trembling. Nicholas handed over his phone, the photo of Amanda and Austin outside the motel filling the screen. Alice stared at it in silence, her expression frozen in disbelief. After a moment, her voice broke as she whispered, "I knew something was off. He's been working late, traveling more, but I never thought." Her voice trailed off as she gripped the edge of the couch, her knuckles turning white. "I didn't want to believe it either," Nicholas admitted quietly. "But it's always the same motel, the same times." Alice wiped away a tear, and her sorrow began to harden into anger. "He acts like the perfect husband," she said bitterly, her voice growing sharper. "But now I see him for what he really is." They sat in tense silence until Alice straightened, her posture stiff with resolve. "What are you planning to do?" she asked, her tone firm despite the crack in her voice. "I don't know yet," Nicholas said honestly, "but I'm not going to let her walk away from this unscathed." Alice nodded, her jaw set. "Then let me help. If we're both in this, we might as well fight back together." Over the next week, Alice proved to be an invaluable ally, driven by her own sense of betrayal. She dug into Austin's phone records, uncovering explicit messages between him and Amanda, messages that left no room for doubt about the affair. "Take a look at this," Alice said one evening, sliding her laptop across the table toward Nicholas. The messages detailed everything: their plans to meet, their mutual complaints about their spouses, and even cruel, mocking remarks. Nicholas's stomach churned as he read them, the words cutting him like fresh wounds. But he forced himself to stay focused. "We need to time this right," Nicholas said, his tone steady despite the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Confronting them isn't enough. They need to face real consequences." Alice's eyes burned with determination. "What's the plan?" "We expose them," Nicholas said bluntly, "to everyone, their families, their friends, their coworkers, and we make sure the courts see the truth." Together, they began plotting their approach, carefully planning when and how to confront Amanda and Austin. They wanted the moment to be public, somewhere neither could deflect or escape. The opportunity arrived on a bright, sunny Saturday. Amanda claimed she was running errands, but the GPS tracker revealed her destination. A local park. She was meeting Austin there, likely hoping the casual setting would keep them from drawing attention. Nicholas and Alice arrived separately, positioning themselves so they could observe without being noticed. From a distance, Nicholas's stomach twisted as he watched Amanda and Austin on a bench, laughing and leaning into each other like love-struck teenagers. The sight sent a wave of fury crashing over him, but he forced himself to remain composed. "Let's end this," he said quietly to Alice, his voice low but resolute. They approached the bench together, Nicholas leading the way. Amanda's face went pale the moment she spotted him, her expression frozen in shock. Austin, sitting beside her, looked just as panicked as Alice appeared behind Nicholas, her presence unmistakable. "What's going on?" Amanda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You tell me," Nicholas said coldly. "Or better yet, why don't you explain to Alice what you've been doing with her husband?" Amanda's wide eyes darted to Austin, silently pleading for support, but he was too stunned to offer anything. "This isn't what it looks like," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Don't," Nicholas interrupted sharply, raising a hand to cut her off. "Don't insult me with that lie. There's no innocent way to explain this." Alice stepped forward, holding up her phone. "I've read the messages, Austin. Every single one. Don't even try to deny it." Austin opened his mouth but faltered, his face paling as Alice's fury bore down on him. "You lied to me," she said, her voice sharp and cutting. "You lied to me, to our kids, to everyone who trusted you. You're a coward." Amanda turned to Nicholas, her face contorted with desperation. "Please," she begged. "We can talk about this. Just you and me." "We'll talk," Nicholas replied icily, his voice devoid of emotion. "In court." The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Amanda and Austin scrambled to salvage what was left of their reputations, but Nicholas and Alice had already set their plans into motion. The evidence Nicholas had painstakingly gathered became the foundation for his case, ensuring Amanda would face the full consequences of her actions. Meeting with his lawyer, Joseph, Nicholas laid out the files he'd meticulously compiled. Joseph reviewed them with a sharp eye, nodding as she flipped through the pages. "This is rock solid," she said confidently. "With this, you'll have a strong argument for custody, especially if we can establish her neglect as a parent." Meanwhile, Alice wasted no time filing for divorce, citing infidelity and emotional cruelty. "Austin won't know what hit him," she said, her tone steely with determination. Amanda, realizing her lies were unraveling, resorted to desperate measures. Her messages to Nicholas swung wildly between tearful apologies and venomous accusations. "You're destroying our family," one read. "This is all your fault," claimed another. But Nicholas ignored her pleas and insults, focusing instead on Elton and Ruby. His children were his priority, and he refused to let Amanda drag them into her chaos. Amanda wasn't done fighting. She filed for joint custody, accusing Nicholas of alienating the kids from her. The stage was set for a high-stakes courtroom battle, one that would test Nicholas's strength and resolve. Standing outside the courthouse, Nicholas adjusted his tie. His stomach knotted with tension. His lawyer, Joseph, stood beside him, radiating confidence. "You're ready for this," she said firmly. "We have the evidence, and Amanda's actions speak for themselves. Stay calm, and let me handle the hard part." Inside the courtroom, Amanda sat across from him, her appearance carefully curated to project innocence. Her lawyer, Ronald, exuded confidence as he began his opening argument. "My client, Amanda Alsop, is a devoted mother who has been unfairly cut off from her children," Ronald declared with practiced ease. "This case is about restoring her rightful role in their lives." Nicholas clenched his jaw but held his composure, Joseph's advice echoing in his mind. "Stay calm." The truth was on his side. When Joseph took the floor, her poised and commanding presence immediately silenced the room. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady and confident. "This case is not about a mother being unjustly separated from her children. It's about a parent who has repeatedly prioritized her own desires at the expense of her responsibilities." With meticulous precision, Joseph presented the damning evidence. The motel receipts, credit card statements for indulgent personal expenses, and phone records exposing Amanda's affair were all laid bare. These actions, Joseph concluded firmly, paint a clear picture of neglect. My client, Nicholas Alsop, has consistently provided a stable, loving environment for Elton and Ruby. He is the parent best equipped to continue doing so. The courtroom hung on every word, the weight of the evidence sinking in. Alice was the next to testify, her words delivering another powerful blow. With measured calm, she detailed the affair and its impact, describing how Amanda and Austin's deceit had torn their families apart. "They didn't just betray their spouses," Alice said, her voice clear despite the emotion in her eyes. "They lied to their children, neglected their commitments, and created chaos for everyone around them. Nicholas has done everything in his power to shield his kids from this mess. He deserves to continue protecting them." Ronald, Amanda's lawyer, frequently objected, but Alice's steady testimony left a profound impression on the court. As the case unfolded, Amanda's carefully crafted image began to unravel. Seated across from Nicholas, her frustration was clear in every clenched jaw and whispered exchange with her lawyer. When it was her turn to take the stand, she shifted tactics, presenting herself as the tearful, remorseful mother. "I've made mistakes," Amanda admitted, tears streaming down her face. "But I love my children more than anything. They need their mother." Her performance might have swayed some, but the mountain of evidence against her was hard to ignore. As the trial neared its conclusion, Nicholas felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had done everything in his power to protect his children and bring the truth to light. Now, the final decision was out of his hands. Joseph didn't let up. With razor-sharp focus, she dismantled Amanda's claims, poking holes in her story and turning the court's attention back to the cold, hard facts. After hours of testimony, cross-examinations, and legal arguments, the judge began delivering the final ruling. The courtroom was silent, every word hanging in the air. "Mr. Alsop has demonstrated his ability to provide a secure and supportive environment for his children," the judge said, her tone measured but firm. "Given the evidence presented, I am awarding full custody to Mr. Alsop. Ms. Alsop will have supervised visitation rights, which will be reviewed in 6 months." Amanda's face contorted with rage, but her lawyer's firm hand on her arm kept her from causing a scene. Nicholas exhaled, the tension in his chest finally easing. It was over, at least for now. In the days following the court's decision, life felt surreal. For the first time in what seemed like ages, the house was peaceful. The tension that had once consumed every corner of their home was replaced with laughter and warmth. Elton and Ruby adapted quickly to their new routine, their smiles brighter and their joy palpable. Nicholas threw himself into his role as a father. He made it a point to be present for every recital, every soccer match, and every bedtime story. Together, they began rebuilding their lives, filling the void Amanda had left with love and stability. But Amanda wasn't ready to let go entirely. Her texts became a mix of cryptic messages and thinly veiled threats, but Nicholas refused to engage. Then, one evening, she crossed a line. She showed up unannounced at Elton's soccer game, her presence sending a ripple of unease through the crowd. Nicholas calmly approached her, keeping his voice low but firm. "Amanda, you're not supposed to be here. This isn't your visitation day." "I just wanted to see my son play," Amanda replied, her voice dripping with insincere sweetness. "This isn't the way to do it," Nicholas said, his tone unwavering. Amanda shot him a glare but left without creating a scene. Nicholas documented the incident and shared it with Joseph the following day, ensuring everything was on record. Over time, Amanda's disruptions became less frequent, her influence fading into the background. Nicholas focused on his children and his work, determined to give them the life they deserved. Each day, the chaos of the past faded a little further into memory. Elton thrived on the school's soccer team, making new friends and scoring goals that filled him with pride. Ruby discovered a love for art, transforming the house into a gallery of her colorful creations, which Nicholas proudly displayed on the fridge. For Nicholas, the journey was about more than just healing. It was about rediscovering himself beyond the shadow of betrayal. He picked up running again, something he hadn't done in years, and began experimenting with cooking, often involving the kids in the process. Weekends were filled with adventures, trips to parks and museums or cozy movie nights at home with bowls of popcorn and their loyal dog, Max, curled up beside them. Bit by bit, life moved forward. The pain of the past still lingered, but it no longer defined them. Nicholas and his children were building something new, something strong and filled with hope. Amanda's supervised visitations were tense but uneventful. Each time she showed up, the kids greeted her politely, but there was a noticeable distance between them. Her repeated absences and lack of meaningful effort had eroded their bond, leaving her more of a stranger than a mother in their eyes. One afternoon, Nicholas received a call from Joseph. Her tone was calm but serious. Amanda has filed to terminate her supervised visits. She's requesting unrestricted access to the children. Nicholas felt the familiar weight settle in his chest. Does this mean another trip to court? Not necessarily, Joseph replied. We can contest it with the evidence we've already presented, but it's likely the judge will want to review the situation. Reluctantly, Nicholas braced himself for another courtroom battle. But to his surprise, the fight never came. Amanda failed to appear at the hearing. Without her presence, the judge had no choice but to dismiss her request. It was a quiet end to her downward spiral, a final act of self-sabotage that marked her retreat from their lives. Months later, Nicholas received an unexpected message from Alice. She had finalized her divorce from Austin and wanted to meet for coffee. When they sat across from each other at the cozy cafe, Alice's expression was lighter, her gratitude clear. You gave me the strength to stand up for myself, she said, her voice steady. I don't know if I could have fought back without your support. Nicholas smiled warmly, his tone sincere. You helped me just as much, Alice. I don't think I could have gone through this alone either. Their conversation gradually shifted from their shared struggles to lighter topics. For the first time in years, Nicholas felt a flicker of something he hadn't expected. Hope. Alice had become a trusted friend, an ally in the chaos. Though neither was ready to dive into anything romantic, there was an undeniable connection between them. A quiet understanding born of shared pain and resilience. On a crisp autumn morning, Nicholas stood at the sidelines of Elton's soccer game, cheering as his son scored a goal. Beside him, Ruby sat cross-legged with her sketchpad, focused on capturing the moment with her usual artistic precision. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting everything in a warm glow, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Nicholas realized something. His life felt whole again. It wasn't flawless, but it was real, and it was his. As the final whistle blew, Elton sprinted across the field toward Nicholas, his face flushed with excitement. Did you see that, Dad? Nicholas grinned, ruffling his son's hair. Of course I did. You were incredible out there. Ruby tugged at his sleeve as they walked toward the car, her voice hopeful. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? Nicholas laughed, unable to resist her bright eyes. How could I say no to that? The drive to their favorite ice cream shop was filled with laughter and playful teasing. The car buzzed with warmth and light, a stark contrast to the tense silences that had once haunted their lives. In that moment, Nicholas felt a deep sense of gratitude for how far they had come. Years passed, and the chaos of the past faded into a distant memory. On a quiet Saturday morning, Nicholas stood in the kitchen of their new home, flipping pancakes while Elton, now a teenager, teased Ruby in the playful way only siblings could. Max, their loyal dog, lay sprawled on the floor by Nicholas's feet, his tail thumping lazily. The pain Amanda had brought into their lives was nothing more than a shadow now, a relic of a chapter that no longer defined them. Brick by brick, Nicholas had rebuilt their world into something stronger, a home filled with love, laughter, and stability. Occasionally, Amanda crossed his mind, but not with bitterness. Instead, there was a quiet sense of detachment, an acknowledgement that she was a part of his story, a painful chapter that had tested him but ultimately made him stronger. As Nicholas poured syrup over Ruby's pancakes, she looked up at him with a bright smile. "Dad, these are the best pancakes ever." Nicholas grinned, his voice warm. "That's because they're made with love." Elton rolled his eyes dramatically, but the smile tugging at the corners of his mouth betrayed him. Life wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It was real. It was theirs. And for Nicholas, that was more than enough.